Okay, so she's talking about Sarah Palin's hit list. Gabrielle Giffords was on that list because she was up for re-election and it looked close, and Sarah Palin and her people, Sarah PAC, put the scope of a gun crosshairs on her district, and that has been focused on by a lot of people, jumped upon. Having said that, it's not a good move. It's not a good move, and I wouldn't want to be Sarah Palin this morning.
Well, they're denying it, despite the fact.
Well, come on.
Despite the fact that Sarah Palin also tweeted that supporters needed to, quote, reload, and referred people to her Facebook page, and that's where she said that. And then, of course, she responded.
All this looks different today.
She responded. Also talked about, quote, a bullseye in responding to these attacks. And Pat, I'm just wondering whether, remember months ago, bullseye icon used to target the 20 Obamacare 11 incumbent seats. Pat, is this not a time for people like Sarah Palin who have used violent imagery? It just has. I know some of my conservative friends and family members won't like that reality, or Michelle Bachmann, who says she wants Minnesotans armed and dangerous. Isn't this an opportune time for them to apologize, not saying that it led to anything, but just to say that they were irresponsible in their rhetoric and they're going to be more careful moving forward?
Well, I certainly think when you talk about moving forward, they ought to be more careful. But I do think it is the effort to sort of draw in Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann into something that is a real tragedy now, when what we're hearing out of Arizona is it had absolutely nothing to do with this individual who for some reason
Pat,
is obsessing.
Pat, I think we established earlier that most of us around this table believe he's mentally disturbed. Right. I'm just saying, though, God, you've worked for 2 presidents. Would you not be in there if you were working for Sarah Palin right now saying, go out and say it had nothing to do with this shooting, but you understand that it was irresponsible and you're going to be more careful moving forward? Wouldn't you give her that advice if you were her aide?
Well, I certainly would. I would give everybody the advice not to tone down the rhetoric and to get away from the military and the armed metaphors and things that a lot of us have used in campaigns, especially at a time like this. You know, I sure would, Joe, but, you know, again, I do think that Sarah Palin, if you will, was convicted in the minds of certain people as soon as this thing occurred out there, and the effort to prove it. And that bothered me as it bothered a lot of people.
And I think it even bothered a lot of moderates, independents. At 5 minutes after Gabby Giffords had been shot, people were taking to the internet to immediately assign blame. But I wonder, Pat, because you have said, and we've joked about it in the past, your New Hampshire speech where you said, mount your horses and ride to the sound of gunfire. Of course, you have used that imagery, and our political allies have used that imagery in 1994 and in 2010. And we've done it as a connection back to, let's say, the Revolutionary War, and you have it with the Tea Party. But obviously, with any political movement, people can take imagery of the Founding Fathers and distort it and expand it. It sounds like you're saying right now that moving forward, that's something that you would warn people against using, that this has led to some bad things.
You know, Joe, I used to use at the end of a speech, I was talking about something, you'd say, okay, fellas, lock and load, and everybody would laugh about it because you're talking about the revolution and all the rest of it, as you mentioned, the Buchanan brigades. And that was, in that time in the 90s, no one thought anything of it, and everybody used it, and people talk about targeted districts. But moving forward, I think that's exactly right. People ought to ease up on it, and they ought to maybe drop it. But at the same time, I'm a little more bothered right now by the effort to try to draw these connections that really don't exist in order to demonize or damage certain people who I think had nothing to do with this and are as sorry about what happened as everyone else.
We won't know for a while, I'm sure. The police are still conducting their investigations, and so it will take a while, Pat. But I agree with you completely. I got elected in part by, very conservative people, libertarians, and a lot of my friends and allies used language like that. I think it's a time to bring that to an end.
Not making any distinction or connection. None. There is a conversation, is there not, medically, about images and messages triggering psychotic individuals to behave?
Yeah, I think we have to remember that if you have a mentally unstable person, that does not mean that person is dissociated from society.
Right.
And he or she may pick up on things. If you think the government's talking to you or your TV is talking to you, which is classic schizoid behavior, we can't say, well, he's just a nut job.
Right.
Because, nut jobs somehow know how to lawyer up.
I've got to say it, and I know there are going to be a lot of people on the left that get angry, but even people on the left have said over the weekend that some have gone too far. And this culture of rage has infected both extremes. So we have sat here and we've talked about my concerns with Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann because they are members of my party.
Right.
And I feel a responsibility to talk about that. I will let the left be responsible and talk about others who have called Republican presidents fascists, who have wanted to, and compared them to Nazis and Hitler. I think we all have a responsibility to clean up our own house.
We need to be civil. You know what? We need to be civil
have
to
a
each
discussion.
other. Yeah.
Right.
Good luck.
Dr. Nancy
Good
Snyderman,
luck.
thank you very, very
bet.
much.